All right, so this is another episode of your average esports podcast, but since I've taken over, I've renamed it to Talking Bullshit or Talking Bullshit, and this will be episode 20. And much like the roster shuffles of EG, I have taken over, but unlike Sumail, I have not kicked out PPD from the tribe because I understand that the teamwork required and the synergy is just too good to leave out. So we can get this started. And on another note, the reason I am taking over is because, of course, Skim has quit his job or retired his job from Dota. I forget the site. No,
From Dota Buff,
the
yeah.
Dota Buff, right? Pretty good site. You should definitely check that out. Definitely pay that extra money to get that exclusive content if you can. And he's moved on to bigger and better things, depending on how you look at it. Complexity. All right.
I'd say it's bigger and better.
I'd say it's bigger and better. You're moving to Texas. You're moving. Maybe
I'm moving to Texas.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, anyway. That's the plan.
Get that insight into the mind of swindles. Possibly. We'll see how that goes.
That's my biggest goal for that entire. I don't know how long I'm going to be there, but for me staying there, my biggest goal is to just make sure that when Swindles does more content effectively.
Yeah. Swindles is a pretty smart fucking player as things go. So,
yeah.
Guess we'll just get into it. Not as much crazy stuff because it was only a week this time around. I'll start with the small thing. Overwatch League. They fined Effect for $1,000 basically because of the accidental middle finger to the camera when he was flipping off his teammates.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring this up is because obviously there's a question as to like, should he have been fined? It was in the rules, but obviously it was an accident. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's good that they fined him because it is in the rules and there's a reason why it's in the rules. Yeah, it was an accident. Yeah, it was no malintent behind it, malicious intent behind it. I think pretty much both sides understand the implication behind the middle finger, and I mean $1,000 effectively is like nothing, right? It's not even a slap on the wrist effectively for a team like London or any team in the Overwatch League really. So I think this is just an important sign basically to signal to the rest of the league that the rule book is being it's being followed, right? People have to stick to the rules no matter how minor the infraction. Yeah. So I'm glad that it's just it was a minor thing really. A couple of people tried to make it a bigger thing than it really was, but I'm glad that both sides at least officially kept it rather minor. There was this article though, I'm not sure if you read that.
Yes, that's the next point. Go ahead, finish it out.
So somebody wrote an article, I don't even know who, but effectively the person made like an excuse for the player. It was like, well, in South Korea the middle finger isn't actually like fuck off, but rather it's like I don't even know what they explain it as, but effectively they were basically pretending as if all South Korea didn't know what the middle finger was, or giving somebody the middle finger was, which was absolutely hilarious, of course.
Yeah, and then somebody on Twitter from Korea is like, no, actually, I grew up in Korea. It actually does mean fuck off. And then they changed the article to say, but it turns out this one random guy on Twitter was flipping people off in Korea when he was in school. It's like, God damn it. God damn it.
Oh, that was hilarious. Honestly, that made the whole situation so much funnier than it really was.
Yeah. I will say, for whatever reason, maybe it's because like Jeff Kaplan is so like has such a hard on for diversity or whatever, but like there's a bunch of weird ass journalism going on in Overwatch League compared to the other esports I follow. Like there's always something about diversity, always something about more hires for other people, and it's getting kind of weird, to be honest.
It is getting kind of weird, and I expect it's going to get even worse from here on out as it's going to become even more mainstream. The whole the whole Overwatch League, but also the game. I mean, as more mainstream as it really gets for a game that already has like 60 million players or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you mentioned, I do think it's because the game celebrates diversity so openly and so not necessarily aggressively, but when they brought out the whole Tracer comic where it was revealed that she was basically homosexual or at the very least bisexual. I think it's great, honestly, that a game approaches that or takes that approach because honestly, a lot of groups have been very underrepresented in other games, and I think Dota only has like 6 female characters or something out of 115, which is
Yeah,
kind of weird
but they
because
do
like,
represent the all important demographic of the panda. I have to point that
yes,
out. That is not something in
that is very
Overwatch League.
important. No, that is
I
very
feel like the
important.
panda has been slighted in Overwatch League.
Which is kind of weird because Panda used to be such a big thing in like Blizzard games, right?
Yeah,
I
see,
mean that's where it came from in Dota,
I assume there's some kind of racism going on in Blizzard. That,
basically.
but
No, but that's. I mean, I think that really perfectly illustrates the whole drama around like Overwatch League, the Overwatch as a game, and like all the diversity hires. Like people are so desperate trying to force this narrative of, well, there's no women on this panel, so certainly Overwatch League hates women, right?
yeah, that's too much. Also, I should point out that we can talk about diversity all we want, but in the game, Tracer is still, I think, the best hero by far. I think that's a fact. Yeah. Even though, like,
definitely,
there's like an interesting article by Volamel about how like the usage of Tracer is being reduced, but I still think Tracer's like the best.
Still, character. Probably one of the best. Yeah.
Yeah.
If utilized correctly, of course.
And we'll go into some roster shuffles here. CSGO is about to explode, apparently, from all the rumors I've heard. So I'm going to skip over that, except for the most interesting one so far. There are actually 2 of them, I guess. Taz is rumored to be about to get kicked out from Virtus Pro, and Neo has been like warned, get your shit together, basically.
The crazy thing is, though, Taz, and I know that I forgot the name, but I know that DK already reported on it and who they're going to want to replace him with, and obviously Kingwin already, denied all those rumors.
Already negotiating hard.
Basically,
that's it. Get. No, we're not doing it. Like, come on. But yeah, go ahead.
But how do you feel about the roster change? Even if they do make it.
All right. So,
do you really think that Neo and Taz are the issues of the team, or do you think that rather replacing them can fix those issues rather?
Well, here's the problem with like the old Virtus Pro, I guess, is they've basically been bad for the last, I'd have to say like 9 months. Actually, no, it's even longer. It's been like, at this point, it's been like close to 11 months since the end of Vegas, basically. Or if you really want, you can extend it to IEM Katowice. Yeah, they got out of the group stages, but they showed decent games in those group stages. But the problem with this entire thing is that basically Taz and Neo have been bad for almost the entirety of that period, except for Epicenter. And obviously, Epicenter is like that was the resurrection of Virtus Pro for one event. And Neo himself was like an MVP level candidate at that event. So maybe that's the reason why they kept Neo and they kicked out Taz. And as a team, they're like too ambitious, I guess. That's the way I put it. Like, it's okay. It's okay to stick together for a long period of time if you're still in like the top 10, or like you can get back into that championship contender state, which they've done for like the last 4 years prior to this year. And yeah, that's sick. That's fucking awesome. And that's like something like everybody loves in a, like, even if you don't know the way they play, even if you don't know CSGO, you hear about this team like, yeah, they've stuck together for like 4 years. Like, goddamn, that's like a presidential term, right? But like something had.
That's what we're currently. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Basically something had to end, right? Like, I legitimately think something had to change because like Epicenter gave you hope, but then right after that they've like fell into an even worse state than what they were before Epicenter in a way. So like it felt like nothing had changed, basically. Like it was just one last hurrah. And I think the reason they went with Taz rather than Neo, obviously, like I pointed out the Neo being really fucking good at one tournament, but it's also because like Taz was the in-game leader and he was like their last. I assume this was like their last like chance. Like, Taz, if you can lead us out of this hole, then you can stay, kind of thing.
Yeah, I imagine. I mean, like you said, something had to happen, honestly, because I don't think can you think of any single team sport where a team can stay together for that long without dropping at some point?
No,
like it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen because there's like over time the opponents are going to get stronger as you basically. I mean, it's very difficult for any group of people to progress together without any sort of like outside change, effectively. Yeah. And I think for esports especially, it's almost unprecedented for a team to be as successful and as successful as for that long as VP has been. So I think they should still be proud of themselves. Obviously, I'm pretty sure they are. But like you said, and I'm like pretty much anybody's saying right now, this had to happen or this has to happen.
Yeah.
So rather sooner than later, because otherwise they're just going to keep themselves dragging along. And if they wait any further, potential prospects that they could hire might be gone. Like other players are going to move forward.
Or even worse, like the prospects that they're looking for go on to have a higher payout price. Like Mishu's at 300,000. Like even just 2 years ago, Nico was only 60,000. Or like that, I think that was rumors. Like he was only 60,000 from Mouse, and that would be a fucking steal today, right? So for whatever reason, like I think it's a bubble, but for whatever reason, the price escalation keeps going up. So you have to do it now. I think it's the best time to do it too.
No, I agree. Especially as I feel like a large portion of the scene is in turmoil at the moment in terms of shuffles.
Yeah.
We see the big Danish shuffle we anticipate the big Danish shuffle. Actually, it already started with, but we'll talk about that later, I'm sure.
Yeah. But we can go into it now. Basically, the only big move, right? The biggest move right now is the fact that Config has been benched in North, which is like Danish speak for either he's been kicked or he's moved on to a different team. I don't know which.
Yes. Well, also, obviously, they replaced Cajun already.
Yeah, and Cajun's already out. Well, Cajun wasn't a very good opper. I don't think he should have been a primary opper in that team, basically.
Honestly, I don't think so either. No offense to Cajun. I really love Cajun B, and Cajun is sort of a scene staple. But at the same time, I don't think he was clutch enough to be the main opper for the team. I felt like he crumbled too often in really clutch situations.
Yeah, it's like the way he plays the op, it's very like stable, it's very solid, but you need way more from an op if you're going to be that kind of player. And it's not like even like, this is weird because I always criticize Skadoodle, but even with Skadoodle, he did have those like clutch rounds when he was like a really bad player where like he could win a 1vx situation or he could win a post plant. You never really saw that with Cajun. I will say it's unfortunate timing for Cajun because Dust 2 looks to be coming into the map pool, and famously he is the Dust 2 opper, so he's one of the Dust 2 oppers, so he's very good at that. But I'm sure if he like moves on to a lower team or moves on to a team as a hybrid player, he can find some form again. All right, that's it for the CS:GO roster shuffles. Those are the most interesting ones to me. Now we're gonna go into the Dota 2 pizza parties, as they're called nowadays.
Pizza parties.
The most dangerous...
Dude, it's crazy how long this pizza party meme has been going on.
It's going to last forever.
I for sure thought it would die out at some point, but people just keep buying pizza and taking pictures of it.
Yeah, it'll never end, man. Because first off, pizza is delicious. Secondly, it's hilarious, and it's like a funny way to announce a kicking. So
no, that's definitely true. I agree.
And so we go to the first person who got pizza party from TNC. It's 1437.
All right, let me go on a mini rant here about 1437.
Yeah.
I do think the guy is smart, and I do think he can be, and he is a good captain. He has been a good captain, obviously. I mean, if you lead a team to as many like top finish, or not necessarily top finishes, but actually top placings, I think is definitely a fair point.
Yeah.
And they played really well. I think you can't be a bad captain after all, but. There is a bit of drama involved with 1437, especially at, what was it? I forgot which event it was. I want to say it was TI.
Yeah.
Because him and Kips was the coach of the team, obviously, right?
Yeah,
and
I know.
Kips as a coach definitely takes a very hands-on approach, and she likes also just be very involved in the draft, and she has good ideas about what to pick, what not to pick, and stuff like that. But apparently they had a falling out at that event, and it resulted in 1437 effectively not taking her advice, which I think if he had done so, they might have won. Who knows? Or at the very least, would have not lost the way they did. So there's that. But 1437, I think if you look at his past teams, he hasn't really stayed with the team for very long.
Yeah,
he's always, obviously that's not always part his fault, because he also gets. Actually, we don't know how much of it is his fault really.
Yeah.
Because whenever he's getting kicked, we don't know. All right, is it really just because they don't want him, or is it because they have somebody better? But effectively, he has never really been with the team for that long as he has been with TNC. So I kind of saw it coming, or rather, I anticipated it too. He's the foreigner as well, so it's easy if you want to make a change. It's easy to look at him and be like, well, we can always just get another Filipino player, right?
Yeah.
Which they did now.
Demon.
Yeah, or get back Demon. Yeah. But also, I think his individual play is just not that high as it needs to be for a position 5 player. like right now, I think position 5 players need to be very skilled as well,
Mm-hmm.
because oftentimes teams will actually look to sort of play like a dynamic duo. Like we used to see a very hard force and very hard 5, 6, 7 players, but
Yeah.
a lot of teams these days have like these 5 players that still do a lot of shit. Like Kuroki, for example, right? He's a 5 position player, but he plays like a 4 in a lot of aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to a lot of other players as well in other teams. I mean, Misery, yeah, he's a 5 position support player, but still he does a lot of things on that 5 position, and I just don't think that 1437 is as good of a player, and that's why I thought it made sense that they replaced him with Cuckoo, because Cuckoo is like such a standout performer
Mm-hmm.
that they basically, all right, we're gonna move Cuckoo from mid to the support position, and then they got pretty much the best mid player that was available, Armo.
Okay, yeah. So that's an interesting take. I will say, for my part, 1437 reminds me a bit of Bulba at this point. Great mind for the game, but
Yeah.
not much of a player. and when I look at his 1437's career, like his achievements, yeah, he was pretty good earlier on. Early on, like I'm thinking like the very I forget what team it was, but it was like he basically went to China and then he won that tournament, right, with that ridiculous
LGD Int,
yeah,
LGD
LGD
International,
and then like he had that ridiculous like intro. That's all I remember from that point.
yeah.
Um,
But even that team though, right?
wasn't
That
like-
fell apart really
fell
quickly.
apart really quickly, right? Like instantly died, right? And the point I'm getting at is like after that, he is very similar to Boba in the sense that all of his best achievements have been from a coaching position.
Yeah, with Secret for sure.
Yeah, and obviously like he has a great mind for the game. I think him and Boba should probably move to coaching full time, but they both have the Cinderin problem where like no maybe I can keep playing, maybe I can keep doing it. No, Cinderin, your true calling is caster. Please just get it into your fucking head, please. I will say only a bit about the drama between him and Kipsel. It's actually really hard to say if he's right or wrong in that instance, and
No, for sure.
the reason I'm saying that is because like all the great leaders, all the great players are extraordinarily stubborn in a strange way. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
it's very hard to draw the line between stubbornness and like adaptability. Because if you're too adaptable, you kind of lose your own sense of identity and what made you good to begin with. But if you're too stubborn, you just kind of stick to the same thing and you die basically. Which is
No, for sure.
It's also one of the reasons like I respected like Kuroki in 2017, like because if you look at the way his team was playing, like yeah, obviously Boba was shit, but even then, like he kind of figured out that they were playing too much to the meta and they had to play more towards their own players. So he's a very he's obviously one of the great captains at this point, but I always respected him for that.
No, for sure. And I mean, we talked about this on some point already, I think. But obviously, Puppy, one of the most sort of like infamously stubborn players in this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Never like banning heroes, even though he knows that they're really strong or that the opponent team is really strong with. But of course, I mean, one of the biggest moments will always be him letting Naga Siren through at TI2 and then beating it continuously as well against all the Chinese teams, and that's just the mark of a great captain. Really, like as you mentioned, like being stubborn, it can be a negative trait, of course, but at the same time, it's also usually a trait of really successful captains as well.
Yeah. Even his loss in TI3 against Alliance, he was actually the smart one of all the leaders there. He was the smart one when he realized it wasn't Bulldog that was the problem. It was S4 that was the problem.
Oh, and hey, they almost won that tournament as well. Like
could have
honestly,
won that. That's so close. That was so fucking close. Yeah.
I think Alliance was without a doubt the best team that year, but the fact that Navi made it so close should go to show what great of a captain Puppy has been at that event.
Yeah. So really. And obviously he's resurrected his career so far, at least this year. We'll see how it keeps going. Next one isn't really a roster shuffle. It's the return of YAEP from his log cabin for the 80th time. And this time he brought along Burning, Ferrari, Hao, and a new guy named Shen Chao. Have you seen any of their games?
No, not at all. I don't think they've played yet.
Yeah.
Maybe they're playing like the streamer stuff, but I expect them to not really play a lot. Maybe for like the national stuff, so tournaments that only happen in China, really.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of qualifiers, but I doubt that they really want to go anywhere with this team because I think most of them have like some sort of streaming engagement that would keep them in China anyway. But I'm really excited for the Shen Chao guy or whatever his name really is, because I checked out his Dota profile, which supposedly it is, and I'm pretty sure it is because I've seen multiple records of that being his account. And if that really is his account, it's damn impressive. The guy basically went to 8K MMR in like a year effectively. Like that's insane. He only played from like 2014 or something onwards, or like even later actually. And he has just such a ridiculously high win rate as well. I think 58 or something.
That's pretty high.
It's really ridiculous. Like if the guy is as good a player in like a pro team as he is in pubs, this could be the next superstar, really.
And obviously, the reason he did this is because he believes he is the next Ice Ice. Though YAEP failed to mention the fact that he also says Ice Ice would never have what it takes to be in a pro team. So
I was just about to say, yeah, he actually didn't like Ice Ice as much after playing in Big God, but well, to be fair, I do think it has yet to be proven though whether or not he was actually correct. Because as much as I loved Wings and as much as I love watching Ice Ice and all these guys play, we haven't seen any of the Wings players since effectively.
Yeah.
Like we see them in a couple of qualifiers, but they're not playing good.
No,
and that's I think the big part. Like as much as I think as we all love them, I think it's fair to ask, was that a fluke that entire year? Because effectively it's only been.
It was an awesome fluke. But
it was an awesome fluke, but it could have been.
Definitely could have been a fluke. Like sometimes I look back at some of those games. I actually do think, in a strange way, I think only Faith Beyond might have been the real deal.
I agree because I think he's the one that, without a doubt, has always shown like that he has really high individual skill, and a lot of times it didn't necessarily come from like individual skill from them, but more so like coordination and like team play and like just having like really crazy plans.
Yeah. There's like a combination of Faith Beyond definitely, right? Like, the thing about Wings is they thought on a very, very different, very different wavelength to every other Dota team. Like, not just like Western teams, not just the Chinese teams, not just like
everybody.
There was like 4 regions and then Wings. Like that's how weird it was.
I think the biggest thing that it always attribute to Wings is the fact that they brought Draw Ranger into the meta, but instead of having it as like a niche last pick, they just first phase picked it. And they're like, well, yeah, I guess you can counter it, but she's so good you can counter it. Yeah. And then they continuously showed, well, you can't counter it. We can just first phase pick it. You can counter it. And then suddenly everybody else realized, well, that's actually really smart. We can just first phase pick the hero. Because up until then, everybody was like, well, it has to be like 4th pick or like 5th pick, really. Yeah. Otherwise, they can counter it. But they were like, nah, you can't counter that. And they were right with it. It's so stupid to think about, but yeah, that's what Wings kind of was.
Yeah, Wings is definitely one of the strangest teams in Dota 2 history.
For sure.
And then there's this other stack that I'm not even sure it's confirmed, but basically...
No, it's pseudo-confirmed. Go ahead. I'll
Tuan, March, Saksa, Anna, and Forev.
Yeah, they've basically already made a change. So March apparently is not necessarily playing with them all the time. Maybe he's like only coaching, but they signed up with a different roster. So basically, they had replaced March with Kaiser from formerly from Planet Dog or Hellraisers. He's like a super good mid player, so that's like a really good replacement.
Yeah. I'm just pointing this out because this is like the weirdest fucking stack. One of the weirdest stacks I've seen.
This is literally world rejects. Yeah. I think that's what it boils down to.
Like,
honestly though, in terms of position, it makes a lot of sense. You have individually speaking some of the best players on their positions. Forev, individually speaking, I don't think anybody will deny that he's one of the best offlaners in the world. He just has like problems meshing with teams and he has communication issues. You have Chuan, that's always been one of the standout individual performers on that 4 position, but also him himself, again, communication and like team play issues. Yeah. But then you have Anna and Kaiser again, very talented players, very skilled players, maybe a little bit inexperienced, both of them. And then you have Saksa as one of the sort of like more experienced 5 position players as well, also very highly individually skilled. It makes a lot of sense on paper, but like I said, it's such a weird composition. How did these guys ever like find each other?
Like, how did they?
It has to be some weird LAN event where they just got drunk at an after party and they're like, let's make a team together.
Yeah, like this team would make a lot more sense if Misery was leading it, because I feel like Misery is definitely a guy who loves revenge. But
yeah,
obviously Misery is now an EG, so that doesn't make much sense. So we'll see how that one goes. The final roster shuffle I know of is the Immortals shuffle, where they kicked out QO, Forev, they got MSS, and they kicked him out, and got Rioa and Velo. What do you think of those two?
Yes. Well, it's I don't hate either of them. Miura or whatever you want to call him. I think 747 was his first nick. Susie is his actual name, or I don't know.
There's too many names.
But he's
man.
he's really talented. Velo isn't bad either, but I don't think either of them are going to change anything. Like Immortals roster is so underwhelming in terms of I don't know. It's not even like skill wise. It's just that they don't have a. It never feels like they actually have a game plan anymore. And I know Dubu is their captain, but it doesn't really feel like he's like a good captain. And I want to say that in previous iterations, it wasn't the fact that Dubu was such a strong captain, but rather that he had also. I mean, in addition to being a decent captain, I think he always had a good co-captain or like a, like a secondary. I mean, in MVP Phoenix, it didn't matter. They just played around Kyo and they just sort of like played that weird Dota where they just ran at everybody. But in Digital Chaos, for example, I think having Bulba in that second seat, I think was a huge deal. But now in Immortals, again, when they kind of have to play or when they wanted to play around Kyo, and it doesn't really work anymore because they're individually just not as skilled, and they just have like a lot of like internal issues as well, and they have maybe they don't believe in each other anymore. Either way, it just doesn't feel like this roster is going to get anywhere, and I don't think these two are going to help it at all because they're not like standout performers. I think both of them actually need player or a team around them that is more successful already, so to elevate them onto the next level. Like if Riora joined like Secret, for example, I think he could be like a huge talent going forward. Like I think he could be definitely not necessarily top mid, but like a top tier ish mid. But because he is joining a team that is definitely not getting anywhere, in my opinion, I don't think he's going to get to that level at any point.
So here's a theoretical then. You said Bulba, but what about the 1437 if he joined the team?
I think that'd be legit. I think that'd be legit as hell.
Yeah, because I feel like the way you described it, like 1437 has everything they need.
No, I agree. I think a player like 1437 could really help them. I think they really need a captain right now that can just sort of like get them out of that tier 2 slump and get them in. Like I think 1437 is like a captain that will always get his team as long as they follow him and as long as he has like good players. He will always get them into like a tier 1 territory effectively, which INT is so far away from it right now. I do think that 1437 isn't necessarily a captain that you can win like titles with. But I think he will definitely get you to that territory because he knows his way around that territory. Like he knows the teams. He has a good approach of the meta for sure. And in most cases, he does outdraft like very inferior captains on most accounts. But it might be a positional clash because Dubu's obviously also a 5-position player.
Well, I mean, just kick Dubu. Somebody's got to go, right? Like if you're telling me Dubu can't hack it, 1437 true. Definitely has hacked it at that level.
True. Well, that's a good point.
All right, so now we go into some tournament results. Obviously, there's been 2 tournaments in the last week that we've been looking at: ESL Genting, the Dota 2 minor, and the E-League Boston Major. We'll go with the Dota 2 one first. So, ESL Genting. This is the tournament where Newbie did it. Newbie did it. As I was screaming into my monitor, they're going to choke. They're going to choke. They actually did not choke. They rose up to the occasion. What do you think?
So nobody expected this, right?
Yeah.
I can't see anybody that really expected this. Maybe somebody bet on it because they were feeling extra risky that day, but effectively nobody really anticipated this for a very good reason. Because as we lined out in the show last week, Newbie just as a team has always choked against these teams, against Secret, against VP, against Liquid. But I think what really allowed them to thrive here is, and I don't want to take anything away from them because they really played fucking good. Yeah. But I think beating Secret was the factor that allowed them to win against Liquid. And unfortunately, Secret had to play with a stand-in, an important stand-in as well. Like if they had to replace mid one again, with CTY, I think they win that matchup. Yeah. But because they replaced Fata, who's like a secondary captain of any team that he's part of, and like he makes a lot of calls. I'm not sure if you watched the game when they had CTY, but it was always Fata like pinging for CTY, like, all right, let's do this, let's do that, or YAEP. Like those two were really vocal in terms of like how to move around the map in like the first 20 minutes effectively.
Yeah.
I think replacing Fata was a huge deal for Secret. That's why they couldn't win that matchup. And I honestly, no matter how they win it, I think Newbie just needed that like boost of confidence, knowing that Kane beat the top 3 or a team from that top 3. And then they just did it against Liquid because they were just like, I mean, you could tell from the way they played against Liquid, they were feeling really confident going into that. and you could tell they were suddenly going for things that they would have never gone for, like smoke gangs or like just general rotations they would never do or they hadn't never done before up until that point. Certainly not against Liquid.
On the point about newbie gaining confidence from Secret, I actually agree a lot, especially in that game too. The game too, whereas like I only watched like I watched the VOD and I was like, oh, I guess newbie won this. So I'm skipping through the VOD. I'm like partway through. I'm like, how the fuck did newbie win this? Like, because there's like a huge lead for Secret, and then like newbie did this thing that I have never seen from them, where like they just hung in there. They just stuck in that game, and they kept trying to find plays, kept trying to find the crack in armor, and then they secreted Secret in a way, because that was like Secret's. That's what Secret did throughout a lot of this tournament before Fada went out. Was like they would just keep fighting evenly, and then once the other team made a mistake, they would take over and then take over the entire game. And that's what newbie kind of did for that second game. And I was like, wow, this is an all new newbie in a way, because like even if they hadn't beaten Liquid this, and they even go out like 3-0 or something, I'd say like I probably would have reversed my position and say you probably want to keep with this 5-man roster, just because it had shown like some glimpse of hope of like the comeback, of like of like becoming mentally stronger in a way. And this actually similar. This happened this situation happened in early on in CS:GO, where the first big rivalry was between NIP and the Very Games Titan lineup. And what happened was like they ended up having to play this LAN game that didn't matter for NIP, but it mattered for Titan. And then NIP obviously they weren't trying very hard. Like they weren't basically at like the max focus, but the French guys, they beat them. And then that gave them the confidence to beat them again when they matched up again, even though they had a mental block against NIP for such a long time. And I feel like that's a similar situation here, even though obviously it's like Secret rather than Liquid, but that I really do think like that mentally like broke open the chains for newbie.
No, and I think looking back, that will. I think in a couple of months from now, when we look at this roster, and maybe they're like maybe they have a couple more titles on their back. I think we'll look back on this moment and on that semifinal, and this is the turning point for them. I think. Yeah, obviously, they still have to prove it. Yeah. They still have to prove it, right? Mm-hmm. It could, for all we know, they could have been a fluke, but still, this was a huge moment for them.
Especially like, even though you call it a fluke, like a best of 5 win over Liquid is fucking, it's fucking legit. It's fucking legit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what do you think about Liquid? Obviously, they got second place here. They did really well, all things considered.
I think they don't look as polished as they used to, which is somewhat to be expected considering the sort of long time that they took off effectively. Yeah. And there's been a huge break, and I don't think they were part of Captain's Draft, so this was effectively like the first big tournament after the big break.
Yeah.
And it's just difficult, man, to get back into that like grind, because obviously the team that we saw win TI and like even afterwards was a team that has been playing for months continuously and been grinding, and they've been pouring all the heart and soul out effectively. And I'm not saying that they didn't try this tournament, right? But it's more so than that they were just maybe a little bit rusty. I do think that there were things that they still had to sort of edge out and iron out rather. And I'm pretty sure we'll see a much stronger Liquid at the major, which, I mean, ultimately that's basically what they wanted. I'm not saying they didn't want to win this event, but they obviously aim for the major more so than the minor, because the major is where the points at. It's kind of stupid that newbie played this event, and we will talk about this later or in a bit, I guess. Yeah. But this was, for all intents and purposes, more a major than a minor, because it was so big, had 16 teams, a great format in my opinion, or at least a very extensive format. And I think it was Eternal Enemy that tweeted out, well, this is congrats newbie on winning the best tournament or the most competitive tournament in this entire season thus far, because this was a tournament that had better format than any major up until now as well.
Yeah, that's actually like kind of tilting. Like they got less points for winning a harder tournament.
Yeah,
that's really tilting.
It's absolutely stupid. It's absolutely stupid.
What the fuck?
And that's why, as big as this win for them maybe was, I think you do have to look at the other teams, VP, Liquid, and Secret. And I don't want to say, they didn't try, but you do have to look at these teams and think to yourself, well, this is going to be a completely different competition in Katowice, because it's going to be the same format, pretty much almost the exact same teams, actually, bar like 3-4 different like minor teams. But when major time comes around, teams like VP and Liquid, they play vastly different. I think they play with much more edge. I'm not saying that they don't want to try, but actually, especially a team like VP definitely tries more in a major. That's for sure. You can definitely tell there's like a huge.
VP definitely have there's something weird about that team where they definitely do have a stronger edge in higher pressure moments, even though they don't actually win those very often. But there's something about that team that's definitely like that. I agree for the most part, but I will say Liquid as a team has never really let the gas off the pedal, so to speak. But obviously they did take a break, and you can't go 100% throughout the entire year. You have to take a break at some point, especially because the majors are important. Smaller events are important, but the entire goal is still going to be TI for Liquid, I believe. So I feel like they're going to be trying to ramp up towards then, but I think it might be a mistake if you actually let newbie gain confidence. It sounds really stupid, but
no, for sure, I agree. Up until now, effectively all three top teams, VP, Secret, Liquid, they could look at newbie, and I'm not saying they could feel overconfident against them, but you basically knew that you were the favorite, the ever favorite of winning that matchup, because again, they tend to not choke against you, but now it's an additional competitor at every event that you go to, right? Before, you were mainly looking at VP, Secret, maybe the one off chance of EG punching a ticket here or there, but newbie was always really the opponent that you were, we'll beat them in the semifinals.
Yeah.
But now
they can eliminate you. I feel that's obviously they couldn't have foreseen this coming, but it's that's a dangerous prospect now.
For sure.
The way I'd say it is, for the last 2 years, actually, I've never felt newbie was a danger to win a major title. Even when they got to the finals of TI, I felt they were going to lose that for sure. And now I actually think if they got to that same position, I think they could win. Maybe we'll see. But I feel there's much more hope now than there was before.
No, for sure.
All right, and then the other team that got into the top 4 is EG. What do you think about EG, Skim? What do you think about EG?
That tweet from Sumail is so hilarious.
I love
the whole you still don't think EG's top tier? What do you want, you punks or something? I don't even know anymore. Yeah. It's such a hilarious meme. It has so much meme potential. That's for sure.
Yeah.
EG is a top team, definitely. It's just that they are still far away from that top 4 at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
They made top 4 because they beat Virtus Pro, but that's just because they always beat Virtus Pro. Honestly, that's not even because they're a better team. It's just because they have a better matchup.
Uh-huh.
But in terms of they're almost like newbie was before in that aspect. I don't really think they can beat Secret or Liquid at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But they look better than. Last week we discussed it, right? We discussed EG a little bit, and I did mention that one of my biggest concerns about EG was always the fact that they, in the back of their heads, they could always, we can always put Samuel mid if we do this and that, and then we can always let him play that and this. But after I said that, they went on and had a couple of games where they had definite signature heroes from Samuel in that mid position, but they didn't put him mid anymore. They actually stuck to him as an offlaner. Yeah. He had Abaddon offlane and Puck offlane, all these things that just all these offlanes that he doesn't necessarily Puck
he plays, but there were games where Storm Spirit was picked and RTZ was playing, and I remember watching the PvD streams, he actually sounded so fucking offended by this idea from EG. You have Storm Spirit and you didn't give it to Sumail? What the fuck is wrong with you people?
Yes.
Kind of a mentality going on, and he actually had this great line where he said, EG don't have an offlaner, they have 3 cores.
Sounds about right. But the thing is, I do think that they've tried hard in this tournament to make sure that they do have an offlaner in Sumail, which is it is a process. It's not going to happen overnight. It has to be a process, and that's why I think at first we saw the transitional sort of like problems where Sumail does go back to the mid lane, where he gets like a very favorable matchup, or he gets a hero that's not necessarily an offlaner, but they make sure that he gets it anyway. Um, but in general, I do think that this is something that we will see. Where I am very confident now that EG is trying to force that process, and it's going to take some time for sure.
Yeah, it's not like
I'm
he's
not even
Zai.
sure what. Yeah, exactly. He's not Zai. I'm not sure which event is next for them. It might actually just be the next major.
I think it's Connor
Um,
Weiss.
yeah,
Yeah, it's definitely
that's the
Connor
major
Weiss
then.
because
Yeah.
yeah, because I remember thinking, oh, PPD is gonna be at that event, so it's finally gonna happen.
Yeah.
PPD versus
So
EG.
it's gonna take some time for them for sure to get used to that, to all of that. But I, I do think they are a team that can always contest for the top four at that point at this moment. I mean, if a team that has literally made a roster change and basically only played this event, I don't really think we can count Captain's Draft. Maybe
Yeah,
well, wait, maybe we can count Captain's Draft because it just is a lot of experience for the team. But their second event, they already placed top four. I think with just raw individual skill, EG will always be a top four contestant in like most scenarios. So this is yet again a team that I look forward to as like a top four.
Skim. Hello. Right, so the internet dropped just like EG dropped PPD. So we're back and we're talking about PPD, not PPD, EG at ESL Genting. Basically, you basically think they're always going to be a top four contender, right?
Effectively, with this lineup at the moment, I don't think a team that has Sumail, RTZ, and Crit will anytime soon not be a top four team. Like I think they would have to play very badly to not like be a top team at the moment. And honestly, right now they're actually in good form. Like they're playing really well individually,
Mm-hmm.
and just that is enough. I think in today yeah, I think that alone is enough, or gonna be enough for them to ensure top four at most events, or at the very least be a contester for top four.
Okay, yeah. The way I think about EG is very similarly to how I think about FaZe, except not as extreme in CS:GO, where they have a lot of individual skill, but they need to front run really hard. If you get what I mean. In the case of
Nah, that's
EG,
true.
in the case of EG, they like when I was watching them throughout this tournament, it's like I turn on the stream and it's like, oh, they won all three lanes. That's great. Next game, oh, they won all three lanes. That's pretty good. Next game, won all three lanes. Like this team, I feel like they have to win pretty hard in the laning stage or in like the early part of the game. But if it doesn't go their way, they kind of get trashed.
Yeah, which we saw against Liquid, right? Once the Liquid sort of like choked off their early game sort of potential,
Mm-hmm.
EG was really struggling, and this is where I think this team just needs more time, really. Among other things, obviously with the role transitions, I think they just need to be able to figure out for themselves how to come back from situations like that, because it's rough. If they had fallen behind against a team like Navi or TNC, I'm sure they could have turned it. But against a team like Liquid, if you fall behind the way they did, it's really rough for anybody really to get back into the game.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to
This
take.
this could have been yeah, this could have been secret. This could have been VP. They could have easily gotten trashed the same way as EG gotten if they had fallen behind that way. So, um, I do think this is something that EG will figure out over time. But at the same time, how much time do you really have in the season at the moment? Because well, next tournament already the major for them.
Yeah,
So if they don't figure it out, then they're gonna have to wait for the next major. And by then, teams will by far have mounted more points than they have.
yeah. And I should point out, like maybe they may not get this. Like they didn't have this for all of last year either.
True. No, true.
And
True.
there are very few teams that actually have this ability to make a comeback when shit goes down. OG is probably the most famous one, but even before OG, there was this leader. His name was PPD. He was quite famous for doing this
For
kind of
making
thing,
comeback. Yeah.
right? Right, but definitely OG's he was famous for that, even though they're basically like gone downhill since.
Liquid
So
actually also before even OG did it, like on the big stage, I think Liquid had like really crazy stats about how they were able to come back from like 30k deficits or something. Like
yeah,
Liquid, and this is why or rather five Youngs when they were that team back then, they were really strong in terms of comeback and maneuvering around the mid game after like a really bad start.
yeah.
And Yeah, I guess it's just the mark of a good team to be able to come to force a win in almost any situation.
Yeah. Whereas like Eternal Envy has the opposite problem. He can never front run. He can only make comebacks.
Yeah. Uh,
So if only if only that combination actually happened, e.g. with Eternal Envy, that'd be pretty funny in its own way. But it's not. So all right, the other two teams, I guess, I think are worth talking about is Vici Gaming. What do you think of them?
I I mean, last week I said that they were the best Chinese team for me, and I think that is still correct to a certain degree. I do think they that against Newbie they just I don't know. I think they played significantly worse against Newbie than they did against any other team, really. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure what it is. I do think that Newbie obviously has sort of. I mean, KP himself said it right. Newbie as a team just excels at team fighting, and any Chinese team is gonna give it to the or gonna allow them to take the team fight head on.
Yeah.
That is definitely a big issue for Vici Gaming because I don't think they have the flexibility of a team like Liquid or Secret where they can just all right, if they want to force team fights, let's just mix it up and we'll do this style. Or for example, Liquid, they're just you guys want a team fight? I guess we'll just dominate the lanes with Chen. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just not something that Vici Gaming is capable of at the moment.
Yeah.
I still think it's a strong team. Don't get me wrong, and at the very least, top two in China. But yeah, I don't know. They just have to play more consistently, which I think, or they have to perform more consistently, which has always been my issue with them and also some of their players that they haven't been too consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Because as consistent as they might have been, like in the grand scheme of things, I think that the fact that they have such a huge drop off against Newbie is a sign of a team that just needs more consistency. Because if they perform the way they did against, if they perform the way they did in the entire tournament up until that point against Newbie, I feel like they give them at least a more difficult run for their money. But as it was,
It was
in
a
that
stomp, basically.
it was a stomp. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, and also draft was actually something that I really didn't like from Vici Gaming that game. But I think that's something I've pointed out earlier that I'm not the biggest fan of Vici Gaming's draft sometimes, just because as much as I like Lanem or actually Mikasa, I should point out
Yeah.
Mikasa because he's the one drafting for them. As much as I like him, I think sometimes he just is a little bit too overconfident with. I guess this is what we talked about, right? Being stubborn and being like very having your own ideas and whatnot. But sometimes he just is too arrogant when it comes to drafting against an opponent. Like for example, PPD when he would draft, he would almost always draft something against the opponent more so than for his own idea.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, he would try to counter the opponent. Whereas I feel like Mikasa a lot of times just he's just like, well, I don't need to counter this. I can just run this, which I think does work, and obviously it has worked for him until a fair or up until now anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, they are still a top 6 team at this event. But I think more so than not, it keeps biting him in the ass, especially against like the really big opponents.
Yeah.
And that's been a trend with his teams in previous teams as well.
Okay. In a similar vein, we have another team that kind of had a shitty draft, kind of was consistent until they weren't. Virtus Pro lost the EG once again, and I was actually thinking in my head, I was actually thinking Virtus Pro should be able to win this because they are a team that will fight you in the lane stage and they can beat EG. But then I woke up, looked at the draft. Yeah, gave EG Lycan twice. What do you think of this?
I don't know. I don't even know where to start. So I tweeted it out, and I think Nahans made a good comment, or he made a good point about how it's not necessarily just the Lycan, but obviously also the Tusk that they had in addition. But I thought that VP were too focused on the Tusk. They're like, oh, if we just take away the Tusk, surely their Lycan isn't going to be as effective anymore. And they did that, but then EG was like, lol, Lycan is still a strong hero. Don't even need the Tusk. And that's why I think if they had just banned the Tusk, man, that would have been so much different. But again, they play significantly worse against EG whenever they do play against EG than they do against other teams. I don't know what it is. It's definitely on like across the board. It's not even just worse drafts, but it's just worse individual play. You'll see Nine Pasha do like really stupid things on the Sand King, for example, just jumping in and just dying or feeding effectively when his carry just died. So they have no way of defending. I think that's how they lost the second game.
Yeah.
There's just so many things that they just do on an individual level that I think they're just too intimidated by perhaps EG's individual skill. They're like, well, I do think they respect each other a lot, both teams. They know how strong they are in terms of individual skill. And I'm not saying they don't respect other teams, but it almost feels like they're respecting Sumail and Ortiz too much, as opposed to just
Playing
basically, just playing their own game. Yeah, I think they're just thinking about it too much.
All right. That covers the top 6. Was there any other team you thought was kind of interesting run this event?
Let me see. I do want to talk about VGG Thunder just a little bit.
Right.
We did talk about them last week, and we did say that they maybe have a better matchup against VG Gaming, or probably should have a better matchup against VG Gaming, and that they were a promising team. I do still think all of those things, and I think this was a really important run for them, because they're not going to be part of the next because of the part of the major, which is a shame for them. Because this team is legitimately like a top 3 team in China at the moment, maybe top 4. We'll see how LGD fares internationally, and I think for this team it's going to be really important to keep qualifying for LAN events. It's easier said than done, because they have to constantly compete with Vici Gaming and potentially LGD and LFY even.
Big God.
But I think this team has to qualify for more LAN events if they want to keep up, because I fear that this team could potentially just not qualify for any LAN events. Then they have to play TI qualifiers. They qualify to TI and then they shit the bed because they don't have the experience. Mm-hmm. And these players, they're all, or most of them, are very young, very inexperienced, or have very minor experiences. I think they need as much experience as they can get on LAN events.
Yeah. All right. All good points. I'll pretty much agree with that. It's hard though. Getting out of fucking China is really hard. It's like a Great Wall, almost. All right. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I have my mic muted.
All right. So, I think that covers ESL Genting, and there's actually a tournament coming up pretty soon. Starladder TV Invitational. DPC points, obviously, but it's only an 18 tournament. At the event, it's going to be LGD, Mineski, Kinguin, Empire, Complexity, Infamous, and then the 2 big ones, Liquid and Newbie. So I'm going to go ahead and guess that Newbie and Liquid are going to be in the finals, but who do you think is going to be the other 2, given the way the groups are? Do you have the groups up?
I do.
All right, so
yes,
I'll go with the first group. It's LGD, Complexity, and Infamous. Yeah. Which one of those do you think is going to get out?
So I work for Complexity, so I have to say Complexity.
Yeah, I will. Whereas I don't, so I will go with the more logical one of LGD. But all right.
And I think LGD is really. Let me just get into that.
Okay.
I think LGD is a scarily good team, because I've only seen them online, and online doesn't necessarily translate into offline much. But LGD is a team that always performs much better online than they do online.
Mm-hmm.
And I think currently what they showed me online is actually scary good. Like, this team, I think, has legit potential to be like the top team in China at the moment if they just keep grinding and if they keep playing. But they have to prove it over and over again, of course.
All right.
But I think in this tournament, they have potential to be top 4, maybe even top 2. Like, if they get a good matchup, if they maybe don't even meet Newbie, for all intents and purposes, if they dodge Newbie and just meet like Mineski, for example, or like whoever really, I do think they have the potential to be top 2, and then I don't know, take on Liquid again. In general, I do think this is like a really good team.
All right. So, obviously you chose Complexity, but can you think of a way the game goes where Complexity beats this LGD that you think is so scary? Like, what does Complexity need to do? What are the victory conditions?
So I think for them to do that is to make sure that they don't tilt, which I think has always been their biggest issue. I think they need to make sure that Chessie has a good game. I think Chessie definitely needs a good lane, and then forward they just have to have Moo and Z-Freak be very aggressive, which I think has always been really their recipe to success. Just have those 2 be very aggressive, very, very sort of like farmed, and just create space all over the map.
All right. The other group is Kinguin, Mineski, Newbie, and Empire. So I'm gonna go ahead and guess we both think Newbie's going out first. Who do you think is coming out? Who else is coming out of that group?
Oh, dude, that's a difficult one, because I think they're all pretty much on a very similar level.
Yeah.
Which is more, it's not necessarily a good level, but they're all they're all a very similar level in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta say probably Mineski, but I wouldn't put it past Kinguin to upset them either.
Yeah, that's a decent call. I have a similar thing, but even though I think Mineski's gonna go out second, I kind of want them to fail, because if they fail, maybe they'll think about making roster changes, and I think they're just 3 away from being an all-time great team. Just burning MY Atlanta,
Maybe.
maybe.
Dude, I've heard rumors that they might even do roster changes. That legitimately they're considering roster changes. So who knows? That might actually happen.
Yeah. Well, either way, they probably do, just because they're pretty inconsistent as a team. Like, pretty good ceiling, pretty low floor though.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's I think a very good way of putting it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a pretty small tournament. We'll move on from there, and we'll go to CS:GO. Did you watch the Boston Major?
I did.
Yeah.
I mean, who didn't? Honestly,
A lot of people fucking watched that major this time.
I think that would have been a huge effing mistake not to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where do you want to start? Do you want to go straight to the finals? I mean, I do think it's worth talking about it. Or no, rather, I think it makes sense to begin with it, just because it's the biggest thing.
Finals
obviously.
is the biggest thing. So, in the finals, we had FaZe, international squad of superstars, the most paid, the most expensive team ever assembled against Cloud9, the most popular CS:GO team.
Is it?
According to Reddit, because apparently like they own like 60% of the flares on Reddit or something.
Oh, all
it was like something crazy like that.
Oh.
Basically, if Cloud9's not like the most popular CS:GO team, it's the most popular NA CS:GO team, or it's definitely pretty fucking popular. I'll give it that. Right, so Cloud9 full of the NA rookies, the NA stars, and Skadoodle. So what did you think of this match?
Oh man, that was such a good match. First of all, it was a bit of a roller coaster because obviously they won each other's map picks.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. So let me talk about Cloud9 first. It felt like everybody showed up on Cloud9's side, really, which I think they needed definitely against FaZe.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the big part for me because I felt like everybody at any point for Cloud9 could clutch it, and that's effectively what happened.
Yes.
Which I think is the huge part. Whereas FaZe, on the other hand, had a lot of very quiet performances, which is kind of scary to think about because if FaZe doesn't, even if FaZe or some of the FaZe players don't show up, they still force it to like double overtime in the third map of the finals, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do think that on FaZe's side, Nico, for example, did not show up in that final at all, at least not in comparison to the way he needed to. Olofmeister tried his best. For sure, Guardian was definitely there, but I feel like Nico and Rain were non-existent.
Yeah, basically,
well, not non-existent, but they were definitely the weakest links in my opinion.
Like, listen, you expect Kerrigan to like not be as good because he's the leader. He's not as skilled. Like that's fine. You can still win off of the other 4. And even then, like you see, like one of the overtimes where like Stewie got like 4 kills, and then Kerrigan's the one that fucking saves the team. Like he did his job, kind of as an individual. He did his job. I question how much he did his job as a leader because I feel he choked. But I do agree on the point that basically Nico was nowhere. Rain showed up for like the first 2 maps, but then he was even worse. He was way worse than Nico on the 3rd map. And if you look at the way the team has been structured throughout the last like months, like Nico, Rain, Guardian, those are your 3 stars, and 2 out of your 3 stars are missing. Olaf tried his fucking hardest, but Olaf is like. Olaf's in like a more supportive position, so he's not like he's gonna break open the fucking game in a way. So really, it was like Guardian like went ham, but that wasn't enough. And
it's just sorry. So just to add to that, it's kind of I almost feel really bad for them, or I do feel really bad for them because Guardian Olaf played really well that finals. Yeah. Really, like Olaf. Honestly, at some point it just felt like he himself could carry FaZe back into like that into victory at certain stages, similar to Guardian. But man, honestly, if Nico just shows up for maybe like 10 rounds, I say maybe 10 rounds, even
the
though that's
10 rounds,
like half the map.
Inferno,
but yeah, like that's a completely different game. Nothing to take away from Cloud9. They played really, really well, and they certainly pressured FaZe into not showing up in to a certain degree, right? But at the same time, it just felt like Nico was just not there at all, like mentally.
This was not our Nico, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, yeah, Nico really like choked. I will say like even then they still almost won, and then Kerrigan, I think he choked in the third map. Because if you watch the T side at the very end, basically they called it a rush, and then that lost to a force buy, and
Yeah.
then FaZe basically went passive the rest of the game on their T side, where they would where they would waste a bunch of utility gaining map control, do nothing, do like a really weak fake, and then run into a bomb site, and then Cloud9 was like, oh, so now we have a double op, and all of us have 4 nades. We're just gonna wait for the time, and then when the team comes through, we'll drop down the nades, and then all of a sudden they're stuck in a terrible crossfire where they have to run through the fire, run through like nades, get blinded, and then die. That's just happened like the entire time. And obviously Stewie on the op like basically shut them down at B, and then when they went to A, like they died to everybody there too. So it was not a good look for FaZe.
No, for sure. But yeah, no. Just to get back to Cloud9, it's really impressive how all of them just showed up.
Yeah.
Which that's really how you win championship games. Like I don't really think that at a certain level, individually speaking, in terms of skill, there's not that big of a discrepancy. Yeah, you can still highlight like Cold Zero or Olaf, for example, and even Nico in like his best performances, right, as like top performers in the game, if no exception. But I think we've always known what this team, in terms of like individual skill, is always capable of if they all show up. And I think every time we talk about Cloud9 or anybody talks about Cloud9, the question is, do they show up? Does Skadoodle show up? Does Stewie show up? Do they all show up at the same time? And do they not throw it all away at like just the clutch moments? And that's what happened. Like they really just showed up. That what led to overtime. That hold from Stewie on B was insane. That was insane. Like if like 2 weeks ago he doesn't do that. Like 2 weeks ago, that's not something you expect from Stewie in that scenario. Same with Ska when he jumps into like on the A side, when he jumps into that crate and like no scopes. What's his face? I don't know. So many things happen for Call9 there that just
it does feel like a miracle run, right? Like,
it does. It for sure does.
And like to add context to the thing you're pointing out is like all 5 players. This is the first ever major finals. It was also the first major semifinals. 4 out of 5 of them had never been to a playoffs in a major before. Like
yes,
like when we talk about like pressure and experience, that's when like it gets to you. But like this was like having like 4 males in one team or something weird. Like just not in terms of skill, but in terms of like how little experience they had and then how well they performed here.
Yeah.
Right? Like
no, I agree.
Like what's like Sumela, he made that first jump at DAC. He's like, holy shit, this guy's a real thing, right? And like this Cloud9 roster, they had never made that jump before, and then all of a sudden all of them show up. Like because Skadoodle hasn't been that good all year, basically. Like he's serviceable. He's like average in my opinion, but he in this tournament he's one of the best operators in the tournament. Tarek, in-game leader, but he's probably been the best player on Cloud9. But he even raised the level here. Stewie, he's actually fallen off since Tarek joined the team, but at this tournament, this is his best tournament since joining the team. Automatic famously is consistent, but against FaZe, he has in like the 3 matchups against FaZe when they lost in like a bunch of the tournaments in 2017. He was nowhere. He was getting stomped in those matches. Rush, he basically changed roles. He was an entry fragger, and now he's on the supportive end, and he on that side he's actually transitioned very well, and he won a shitload of clutches for this team. So, like everything worked out well for Cloud9.
Everything worked out, and that's why I think a lot of people, if you, I mean, I know you did, but for those of you out there who like followed like Twitter that night, or any social media platform really, people from all over esports were saying how this is pretty much one of the craziest finals, but also just craziest tournament runs ever to grace esport effectively, because I can't think of another example really where a team like Cloud9 without all the experience, as you mentioned, first time major playoffs for most of them, first time semifinals, first time finals, making that run on home soil and then having such a crazy finals, it's unprecedented, I think. And a lot of teams were like,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and people were like from Dota. I know Vlad, for example, tweeted "Sorry TI3," and like so many people were like, "Yeah, TI3 was great and all, and like it will always be a special memory, but this is probably the best finals they've ever seen in like any LAN event."
Yeah, like the thing is, like honestly, like the World Championship finals are usually pretty bad. Like I'm talking about like things like BlizzCon. Actually, EVO's surprisingly really good, but I don't know why that's the case. TI, except for like TI3, most of them have been like kind of mediocre-ish.
Yeah.
Like, some of them have had good games, but none of them have taken to the final series, final map. Like everybody still talks about TI3, and I still think that Game 5 is the most legit Game 5 of TI history.
For sure.
But this one's like
I
the
mean,
most legit major finals game in all of CS:GO history.
and again, probably the most legit finals in any esport in all of esport, really.
Yeah, like you can make arguments for other ones, but this is definitely going to be on the list.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
That was so insane, and I was not at home when I watched it. I was actually at a friend's because we're like doing a housewarming.
Yeah.
And I was watching my phone because I mean, I'm still interested, and we were playing like board games and shit. So I just had it on my phone, but I went nuts because I couldn't keep myself contained to just the board game because I just saw like really sick clutches, and I just went nuts. And everybody like was asking me what I was watching. And then I showed them, and then at the end of the day, we just spent like 30 minutes just sitting there, just watching on my phone. 4 people, 3 of them they never played CS:GO. They've never played any video, or rather, they play only like console games, right?
Yeah.
They're not really gamers. They have never watched esports. They of course know what esports is because they've worked in esports, but they never really watched any esports. But they just spent 30 minutes there just watching the last 10 rounds on Inferno.
Those were fucking crazy 10 rounds.
Exactly, those were fucking crazy 10 rounds. And they were as sort of like tense about everything as I was. Really, they were like rooting actively for Cloud9 because I had told them about the implications of the finals and know the meaning behind all of it, and they were like so almost involved and like really into it. And that's why I think this is sort of like off topic, but I think this final is a perfect example of why CS:GO is probably the best spectator esport there is. Because it's so easy to get soaked in, and it has so much history, and there's so many storylines to follow, and I don't know, it's just a great esport to follow, really.
And like, even when like the game kind of devolves in like this really weird, chaotic way, individuals can step up in a very strong way. Like I feel like that's kind of like a problem in like League of Legends, for instance. Not as much in Dota 2, but it can be depending on how the game goes. Whereas like in CS:GO, if you get into the overtime, like the game resets in a way. Everybody gets all their money, everybody gets all their weapons, and then you go at it again, right? Yeah. And obviously, there was like so many fucking crazy. Honestly, like the craziest clutch had to. Actually, there was too many of them. It's like there was the Tarek ace.
That's the thing. There's too many.
There's
too many.
There's like a Stewie almost ace, and then Kerrigan beats him. Then there's like a fucking Guardian with a rifle saves the goddamn team in overtime to get second overtime. Like there was so much shit going down. Or like a fucking Nico smoke play is like, oh my fucking god, he got so lucky. He let 4 of them pass and somehow got the guy with the bomb. Like, what the fuck is
bomb.
this?
Oh, yeah. That game had so many, like, other finals could hope for, like, one of those moments or, like, 2 of those moments, right? But this finals had, like, 10, 20 of them where they're just every player sort of, like, clutched his way out of a situation.
That they shouldn't have.
But they shouldn't have, yeah. But yeah, that was a crazy finals, and I think it was a good end to like a really good tournament. Just to get back to the Boston Major in general, it was just a really good event in general, which I don't know, it's just very enjoyable to watch. It sucked, it definitely showed a lot of flaws with the major system we talked about last week. Only 2 legend teams in the top 8.
Yeah,
but we still had great performances because ultimately I do think we had some of the best teams in those top 8. Fnatic, SK, that best of 3 was insane as well. That could have been a final, honestly. The way it played out.
That was actually the second best series of this tournament.
Exactly. Then we had, Call9 versus SK wasn't a bad best of 3 either. Yeah, we had the rest of those were like 2-0s in the top 8, but still we had good performances. Like FaZe absolutely dominating. We had Navi playing pretty good against QB Fire, of course, and then G2 was a big letdown.
G2 choked hard, man. They choked on their baguette pretty hard. I was, and then I guess now we can go on to the rest of the bracket, or basically like FaZe beat Mouse. First game was really good, surprisingly, even though like FaZe obviously. Here's the thing about that team.
FaZe shouldn't have won that.
FaZe had no right to be in that game. But they were like individually so much better. That was some bullshit, to be honest. But that's sometimes how it goes.
That's the kind of game though that if Mouseboats lose that game, they're not going to win the second one.
Yeah,
that's at least what I was thinking. Yeah,
yeah.
Like if you lose this game the way you're losing it right now, you're not going to come back from that, and they definitely didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely did not. And FaZe basically stole Nuke, and then like this is. You don't watch Melee, but this is like this is kind of like the way they say it is, the way Melee works is like a double elimination bracket, right? But if you lose in the winner's side, but you lose in like a terrible, terrible way, you're basically sent to the Shadow Realm. And what that means is basically you play in the loser's bracket, but all you're really thinking about is your loss in the upper bracket, and then you lose in the loser's bracket without even putting up a fight. That's kind of what happened to Mouse.
Oh right, yeah. No, I think you mentioned that before. Yeah, that's actually really
that's like a
cool way of looking at it.
That's a good way to look at it because basically like
no, it really
you weren't
is.
really playing game 2. You were still in game 1 thinking, God damn it.
Yes. No, 100%. And I think that's definitely what happened there. And it happens a lot of times with teams.
Yeah, it happens in a bunch of different games too. So it's like I think it's a pretty good term, even though obviously Shadow Realm's kind of but it's a good way to explaining what happened to Mouse there. Navi didn't really put up much of a fight against FaZe, and I feel like QB Fire was like a really easy draw for them, which actually puts Navi in a very questionable state, to be honest. Because like
if they don't even show up against, or if they rather the way they play against FaZe, I do think it's a bit worrying for them because if you consider this run overall, like their entire run, who did they win against? They won against. No, wait.
They won against Big. They won against TL with a stand-in, and they won against Fnatic.
It's Fnatic. The Fnatic one, I guess,
that was pretty legit.
Exactly, but at the same time, it was also Inferno, which is one of Navi's
best maps.
Best maps. So it's like, TL is like, as you mentioned, it's the stand-in, and Big was sort of like an expected win anyway. So overall, the only opponent that they beat that was like sort of worth noting is Fnatic. But again, it was like their best map in the best of 1. So this is again coming back to the major format as a whole, because we see teams getting to the top 8 without having seen any significant records from them. Even G2, there's a case to be made that the opponents that they beat weren't necessarily worth talking about either. They beat QB Fire, which of course is impressive considering QB Fire was on fire that event. But at the same time, again, just best of 1, and it was still, I mean, for the upsets that they caused, QB Fire is still just QB Fire. And then who else did they beat? TL with a stand-in, and then Cloud9, who was just arguably very bad on day 1.
I don't think they even played Cloud9. Did they?
Didn't they? No, they did. They did the first round
okay.
Because that's the bullshit thing. They both qualified 3-0 from the challenger stage.
G2. That's G2 you're talking about.
Oh yeah, I was talking about G2.
Yeah.
Because they also made top 8, right? Despite really beating anybody worth
G2 and Navi had very similar runs, where it's like they made it. I'd call it like an empty calorie run. Like you got the calories, you got to the placing, but there was no substance in them, right?
Yeah. The only thing which I think made people believe why G2 was sort of like capable of, going forward was because the way they did it. They looked really strong, right? Mm-hmm. Despite the opponents being weak and potentially not worth noting, they definitely were really strong beating them. Yeah. And we saw Shocks, we saw NBK, or Kenny S, sorry,
MBK,
showing
actually,
up.
Yeah.
Well, Kenny S as well.
Well, Kenny S did decent, but yeah, it was like basically like they destroyed their opponents. Yeah. But it was like they choked in the quarterfinals, and like Cloud9 beat them comprehensively. Like what was it? Like Thorne basically said like Cloud9 out G2 in a way.
Yeah. And
that's a good way to put it.
That's definitely the way of putting it.
And this is definitely going to cause another French Revolution. And I've heard that they will take... actually, I didn't hear, but I assume at this point... Like, I made this prediction about a year ago, where, like, if this G2 roster fails, their only answer left is existence.
Well, that's what... Obviously, I mean, I think that's what people want to see happen, because I think that's the most logical choice.
Yeah.
To go to existence, or to rather pick them up. But... there's that weird,
the weird thing where they all hate existence.
We all hate existence. Yeah, they're like, nah, fuck that guy, dude.
No, dude. If you lose enough, I think it'll be enough. Like, if EG from Dota 2, if they had truly like been truly terrible throughout,
you think they would have crawled back to PPD?
They would have gone back to PPD, no matter how like bad it was. Obviously, they weren't truly terrible. They were getting top 4s. Sometimes they're winning tournaments, so they did it. They thought, oh, maybe it's not worth it. It actually was worth it if they wanted to win TI, but they don't think of it that way. Yeah. And I'm gonna guess RTZ won't win that TI without PBD. It's my guess. The last run I guess we'll talk about is SK and Fnatic, because I think that was a really good. Both teams were pretty good this tournament.
It's honestly a shame that Fnatic had to go out in the quarterfinals, because I think the way they performed. I mean, I think something that we. Or at least I want to say you also said that, but I think something that I at least was wanted to see from Fnatic was Lekro showing up, because I think that was something that they needed. Because I mean, Crims has been showing up all event already, and I'm not saying that Lekro didn't show up in the group stage, but I think for them to be really strong contender in the playoffs, they needed Lekro definitely also to show up, and Golden of course as well. And he showed up, and they almost I think they were close to doing it, honestly.
Actually, they could have won the series 2-0 against SK. That's how close they were.
Yeah. And it's just a bit of a shame that they had to face SK this early on, because SK is still SK despite the stand-in, of course.
Yeah.
So I feel like if this had gone any other way, maybe we see them in the semifinals, and depending on the matchup, potentially even in the finals. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how brackets work, right? I mean, it's just very unfortunate sometimes for teams.
Yeah, but this is actually, I wasn't so high up on Fnatic as a bunch of other people were, because like, in terms of skill, like, the only really skilled player I saw on that team was like Crims, if he could like return to that form, maybe JW if he could return to that form, and maybe Lekro if he could like get it together in a sense, because like he's basically been being shuffled around in like Godset and Fnatic for a bunch of months, so I don't actually know if he ever found a consistent game. But this playoff run or against series against SK really convinced me like this team might be the real deal. Like, obviously, like, I don't know if they can expect Crims to go godlike, because he did again, but they could definitely expect like Lekro to be this good, and they can definitely, their system and their tactics and their teamwork are still going to be consistent factors in the team. So I feel like this Fnatic roster, assuming they don't run against FaZe again, because FaZe has their number also, but I think that's like their only really weak matchup. I think they could run pretty decently against the other teams. Well, maybe not SK with bolts, but you know what I mean, right? Like they could, they could run a pretty good gamut. And what I really liked about this Fnatic that I didn't see from G2 is they really fought to like tooth and nail to the very fucking end, right? Like that's
true.
That's like
G2 felt like no, this is not even supposed to be a joke. It definitely felt like they gave up pretty early.
Yeah.
Or they surrendered themselves to the fact that they weren't going to win that series anymore. But Fnatic definitely gave it their all. You could tell that they were really trying hard not to like give any round away. But of course, you know, if you're up against SK, that's only
And I'd like to point out like the all-time great duo of CS:GO, Olaf Meister and Crims. Both of them fucking went hard this major. Even when they're apart, they're still fucking amazing, right?
Really got them impressive for sure.
Really have a lot of respect for those two. They really fucking like play their hearts out at this major. Really proven like they really were two of the clutchest in CS:GO history, right?
Good to see them. Good to see them at the top again. For sure.
Yeah, SK obviously like this is like another standing issue. Like last time they had Fox. I think one of the time two majors ago they had Fox. This time they have Phelps. Obviously they played with Phelps, but like they changed his positions a bunch again because they didn't want to fuck up with their own natural chemistry with bolts.
I want to point out how goddamn strong Fallen was this event.
He was pretty strong up until the semifinals.
Well, yeah, up until the semifinals, yeah. But I think there have definitely been past performances in the last year where Fallen was not necessarily the best, and I think like I probably would have always bet against him in most cases when it comes to like ops 1v1s.
Yeah.
But this tournament he showed up again. Yeah, up until the semifinals, and the semifinals was definitely a bit of a rough game for him, but also just for SK in general. But he showed up. Like he had like crazy like was it against? I think it was against Fnatic on Overpass. That crazy quick scope with his scout. Like that was so quick. I didn't even see it. I had to literally like pull up a replay and then go frame by frame to see that it was a flick shot. I legitimately thought it was a no scope.
That's a great point because like when Fallen was like the best opera in the world, we're talking about like 2 years ago, I think, or maybe like 1.5 years ago. Like
I think 2 years is fine. Yeah,
like,
fair. Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure about the timeline, but right before like Fox joined the team, basically, with the FNX lineup, he actually had the best scout in the game. And then, like, the fact that he was, like, getting these fucking crazy scout shots in this tournament made me think, oh, maybe he's really come back. And he really did. Like, Fallen's a funny character because, like, he's kind of overrated. He's been overrated for, like, the past few months. Just because he has, like, a bunch of... he has a bunch of really crazy hero plays. You know what I mean? Like, oh shit,
No, yeah, I get that.
like oh shit, this is a breaking round. It's 1v4, but it's Fallen, and then Fallen wins it, and then he doesn't do much else the rest of the map. But everybody thinks
But people will still keep thinking about that run round. They're like, yeah, Fallen was like
Fallen was a god.
such a great player. Yeah.
Yeah, like
It also doesn't help that obviously his fan base and like his team's fan base in general can be very obnoxious about certain things.
yeah, but like yeah.
I agree with you though that he's a bit overrated. But I mean,
But he wasn't overrated here. Like this is like
No,
this was a
for
pretty
sure.
legit tournament. I personally think it was a legit tournament for Fallen. He's like a hell of a player. I actually feel like on the flip side though, Fur wasn't as good.
Him and actually, I want to also point out Taco. I know that Taco still had like great performances, but I don't know. Sometimes there was this one round. I'm not sure. Was it against Cloud9? Where he was like really patient with his trigger. He's like wrapping around, walking slowly, and then he misses like his entire spray, and he gets killed in turn. I want to say it was against Cloud9. Was it? No, I think it wasn't. I don't even know.
I don't remember.
It might have been
like,
against
definitely,
Fnatic, actually.
But I definitely know what you mean. Like,
Yeah.
This SK wasn't as on form as it was with the Bolts lineup.
No, definitely. Like I think you could tell that sort of everybody was like
Off.
Sometimes you would see something and you'd be like, well, this is not typical for him at all. Like sometimes, like if this like standard Cold Zero or standard Taco, standard Fur would like hit these shots, would clutch this moment, would do these things. It definitely felt very off for them this event.
Yeah, but luckily for them, this is only one event, and they have like a warm up event at the summit before they really get into things into the season. So, we'll have to see. And then like this is a weird tangent, I guess, but I feel like this SK this current one with Bolts, I legitimately think they think they're going to be the greatest of all time lineup. Like,
I mean, that's what they're aiming to be. Right?
I think that's not something you usually plan for, but I think they're actually planning for this to be that lineup. Like this is the one that's going to topple 2015 Fnatic in their eyes. This is going to be their super team. I think that's what they're thinking.
But do you agree with them?
I mean, first off, you have to respect the fact that if you become the greatest of all time lineup, you've basically done something impossible in a sense. Like you've basically become a god, right? At that point, and I always use this line when I try to explain why it's so impressive when you can topple somebody like that. It's basically because you ever heard like the omnipotent like paradox, or like, can God create a rock so heavy that he cannot lift it? Like that's basically what SK is planning to do here, and I'm gonna bet on the rock for now, but this SK has a real chance. that's how I think about it.
I agree. Again, it's like, I mean, a team like SK that can still like reach semifinals of a major with a stand-in. If they're like on like full force, it's hard to not imagine them reaching like heights that other teams haven't gone to before.
Yeah, like I guess the best way to explain it is like, you know, the finals, right? Bunch of crazy clutches. That's like SK on a normal day. That's like from rounds like 26 to 30, like that's like SK all day, every day. Like always making those hero plays, always. Like doesn't matter what side, doesn't matter what map. So it's hard to. But I will say like what Fnatic did was like so impressive that I can't say somebody will do it until they've actually done it. That's how I think.
That's a good point. No, that's a good point.
I guess.
See, but I want to say though that I think the only reason why I also think that they can do it, or one of the reasons why I think they can do it, is because FaZe still has to overcome the whole like beating them in the finals thing.
Yeah, and then G2, which their best matchup is about to break up.
Yeah, and then also, of course, I mean, the fact that, or just the signal fact alone that FaZe already can win the tournament, even though SK is not even in there. Mm-hmm. I think, and this is similar to what I think Newbie has had always the issue with, like, as great as FaZe may be as a team, I do think that there's, like, a mental sort of thing that they need to get over, like, first off, like, beating SK in the finals.
Yeah.
But then also just, I think if they have a major title under the belt, I think FaZe is going to be a completely different team. I think they're going to be much more confident. Like, it's kind of crazy to think about because they're already confident enough to always go into the like finals or like semifinals at the very least.
Yeah,
of course. But I think if they just win that major title once, I think there's going to be a natural sort of like confidence and like aura around them that allows them to just become even better and like consistently challenge SK, which obviously they're already challenging them, but at the moment, of course, SK is just always ahead of them, and that's why I think that if SK want to be the best there ever was, and like want to effectively beat Fnatic's run, I think it can only happen if FaZe never wins a major over them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I will say you're right about FaZe as a team, but as individuals, they have 2 out of 5 clutch factors. I think Guardian always shows up. I think Olaf Meister always shows up, but for whatever reason, their clutch factor hasn't like transferred over to the other players as much.
To the other players, yeah.
Yeah, like those two, like they always play out of their fucking minds. And when, at least in this major, they really did. So, there's that. And I'd also like to point out for one last final bit about this major, because I think we're about to wrap up. This is Guardian's 3rd major final, and he lost again.
I feel so bad for the guy, man. It's not. I mean, especially because he showed up, right? It feels so. A player of his caliber should have had a major title under his belt already.
Yeah, he was the best player at Cluj-Napoca, and like I think I tweeted out something like I thought MVP was Skadoodle, but I rewatched like the games, rewatched a bit of it. Honestly, I actually think Guardian was probably the best player because a bunch of FaZe players didn't show up, and yeah, Skadoodle has the fact that like he and his team played a bunch of harder teams, but all of his players showed up. There's like Guardian, like it was only him and Olaf for parts of it. Sometimes Rain, sometimes Nico, but not very often and not very consistently.
No, I get that, and I mean, I if I had to pick an MVP, I probably would have picked Guardian as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel very iffy about giving it to Skadoodle because I think a lot of why people want to give him the MVP is because
he's been so bad.
But that's just been like the big storyline for this entire major playoffs, right? Oh, Skadoodle's never made like top 8. He's never been a legend. He's never been into that, and now he's finally done it. And he's like the only one left from the old Cloud9 roster, and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
It feels like people wanted to give it to him. Not that he didn't perform well enough. I do think I think there are legitimate arguments to be made for him to have that title, but I do think like you said, I think it definitely I would give it to our Guardian.
And then one of the reasons I actually tipped over to Guardian was because I think HLTV gave the MVP to Tarek, and then when I thought about it in my mind, I thought, wait, actually that's a legitimate like case for Tarek to be MVP here. Like disregard the fact that he's leader, he actually had a lot of impact plays. He was consistent throughout the entire event. And I was like, wait, if you have 2 MVPs on one team, but then one other guy on the other team with like players who aren't showing up has an equal or better performance to them, then I feel like he's the one who the most valuable player. It's like
I get that.
It's like the situation where I was like, the most valuable player can't go to anybody on Liquid in Dota 2 because everybody on that team was too good. Like
I get that.
That's why I gave it to like Resolution Night or maybe Afu or something like.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the situation here. So yeah, I definitely think Guardian was the MVP. And now we're going to go into the CS:GO roster shuffle, where like apparently everybody's going to break down. Apparently, according to the rumors, but we'll have to see if it happens next week. See if not. All right, that should end the episode. You have any shout outs? Complexity,
no.
Friends?
No. Well, yeah, obviously. Shout out to Complexity. Great guys, great people, great organization. Shout out to Complexity sponsors. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, sometime soon I'll be in Frisco. I'm looking forward to some Texas warmth because Germany has got them cold.
Yeah, you will. You might enjoy the life there. It's the home of Counter-Strike, so maybe you can watch more Counter-Strike when you're there.
That's what I'm looking forward to. Yeah. Hopefully in person. I want to watch the Complexity team live in action.
Yeah. They'll have to qualify first for that to happen.
They'll do that.
Right.
I mean, I can also just watch them from the office, but you know.
All right, so that should end it. You can check out my stuff at vpesports.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye.